Hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty, president of the Atheist Community of Austin here in Austin, Texas. March 23rd, 2020 is Atheist Day internationally, an effort that was begun by Atheist Republic and is shared by many organizations around the world, promoting an opportunity for people to get to know and understand atheism, atheists, for atheists to come out and to stand in opposition to oppressive governments, mobs, and religious zealots. Religious privilege and intolerance have marginalized many non-believers. In many places, they're being killed. In many places, their rights are being marginalized. But even here in the United States, while I have no fear as an atheist of being killed by a religious mob, I do have to deal with many individuals who are being ostracized from their family, who are being set aside and cast aside, who feel no good sense of community, and who have difficulty interacting with family, and whose rights are being marginalized, if not in the letter of the law, then in what the public pushes forward in their acceptance of people who don't share their religious views, or more accurately, their lack of acceptance for those people. Now in Austin, we were going to participate by having a big rally at the Capitol, and we had a PA system. We had speakers coming in from all around the country and the world, Seth Andrews, Mandisa Thomas, and others. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to make a change of plans. In the interest of the health and safety of everyone involved, most of our speakers are not traveling to Austin at all, and instead will be submitting videos so that we will be producing as part of this special live stream, Atheist Day International Austin. In addition, the Atheist Community of Austin's Free Thought Library is closed to the public. The only people who will be at the building are cast and crew or individual speakers. And we've quarantined the building off into sections in order to minimize the impact of this virus on everyone involved. But we won't let anything stop us from continuing to push for equality and rights and understanding of the atheist, secular, free-thinking, non-believing community, whatever label you choose to put on it. We're going to keep pushing forward. So, if you're quarantined, if you're stuck at home, if you are practicing social isolation, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, follow the necessary precautions, get yourself something nice to drink, sit back in a chair, and watch this special presentation of Atheist Day Austin.
Hello everyone, I'm Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, which is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. I am happy to be joining you today for International Atheist Day. I wish it could be in person, but of course, due to the current circumstances, that isn't possible, but I'm happy to be joining you via video today, and I hope you know how special and important a day like this is for us. It is still important that we are dispelling any stigma and negativity surrounding the term atheist and the identity. First, it is a very simple identity, meaning that we don't believe in any gods, spirits, or supernatural beings. Some would further describe it as, the rejection of all existing claims of any gods, which is totally valid, or any other deities, because if we don't believe in any gods, we certainly don't believe in any devils or evil spirits as actually existing. Now, on its face, that's very simple, right? You think people would just accept that for what it is and it be okay. But of course, as we know, unfortunately, it is not. And as you can tell by the focus of my organization for marginalized communities, that this can be much more of a challenge for us. Now, you see me here as a Black woman who does identify as atheist. Now, traditionally, or as we've seen in the public sphere, there aren't that many of us who would subscribe to non-belief or atheism who are openly identifying, right? And there are a number of reasons for that. In my involvement in this movement, for going on 10 years now. I've talked to people who want to know, why aren't there more Black atheists, or why aren't there more people of color openly identifying? Why aren't more of us participating in the communities that we know exist? So, for those of you who aren't aware but should be, I speak for a number of atheists in the Black community, and I can tell you that, having been raised from in New York City in the Black community, it can be a challenge to openly identify. Now, there's always been critique of the church within the community. Don't get it twisted. The Black community is not a monolith. We are perfectly capable of questioning oppressive institutions, especially as it pertains to racial justice, economic justice, rather injustice towards our communities and other marginalized people. The challenge, though, is that there is still an overwhelming and pervasive presence of the church within the community, and there is this perception that not only does the church identify that it is our identifier, but also that it is a support system in a way that people actually need it. Now, some of us, myself included, would challenge that. As we challenge that narrative, because for one, it isn't true, and then institutionally, it has been a breeding ground for a number of other oppressive institutions, just like racism, economic injustice, and such. And so these are things that, as a community, it's important for us to talk about, and it's important for us to challenge. Now, it starts with, first, accepting the identity that atheism and being an atheist is not a dirty word, that it is something that we can be proud of. We can be proud of incorporating our identities and our ideals and our practices into our everyday lives. There are a number of us who do good for the world. We want to see as much improvement as possible. And we see this now, even with the current circumstances, right? This is not the first outbreak or pandemic that we've ever experienced. However, it is important for us to look to the science and technological advancements in order to prevent these things from happening and to prevent more people from getting infected. This does not happen without these advancements, and it's important for us to speak up. This is one of the reasons why it's good to band together as a community. And again, it starts with acknowledgments and days like this. Now, community building is important to me personally, as well as to the mission of our organization, because we are still dealing with a representation problem within our own community. And also, we have a tendency to point the finger at the religious community and how they've been oppressive towards others. However, some of us still incorporate those formerly religious beliefs and ideals and kind of bring them into the secular movement and communities. And this is something that we continue to have to discuss and tackle. Now, should it be entirely up to me as a Black woman atheist who is the head of an organization that specifically focuses on the Black atheists? No, it should not. Because the more we see our world changing, the more we see that our communities are changing. It is important for those who have been involved, whether you've been involved in the community for a long time or you're just entering the community, how we engage each other, and also how we understand and support the different mechanisms within our community, whether they are online, whether they are or in person, which are they're all very important. how we continue to support and sustain each other will be crucial to our growth and development. I don't want to say survival, because there are many people who are coming out of religion, and there always will be. In fact, we know that there are now the non-religious community is among the largest voting bloc. It's the numbers are growing. It's showing, but how we continue to mobilize is going to be crucial. So with that being said, once we come to the identity, once we continue to develop our support systems for people who are questioning religion, and some of who are deathly afraid to identify as atheists, and in some areas of the world that could still be a death sentence. It is very, very dangerous at times, but it is important that for those of us who have the capability to organize and speak up and put together events like this, we continue to do so, but it does not happen without the support of the people. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be in front and center like some of us. However, the support behind the scenes is just as important. So with that being said, I'd like to continue to ask all of you to support organizations like the Atheist Community of Austin, who, if you see here, supported the Black Non-Believers CCon in 2019. They were one of our sponsors. So these are just a few different ways that we support each other. You may have seen me previously on Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience with our beloved Matt Dillahunty, who is just an amazing individual. Matt was someone who was crucial to my re-identification as an atheist, because of the way he just his no nonsense, matter of fact approach. And that's something that we can appreciate, the fact that there are different approaches to this subject, and also to our the way we relate and communicate. Sometimes it won't be pretty, and that's okay, but the more we stand strong and the more we band together as a community as much as possible, while working on the things that we need to internally, because they are important. So of course, as I said before, my focus, and personally and as an organization, is to increase the visibility and the representation of Black folks who are atheists, questioning religion, in favor of leaving, as well as building up that community in support. And this is done through a number of ways. I just showed you one of them, which is our cruise convention that we started doing in 2017. Hopefully, we will be able to embark on this journey in 2020. Keeping my fingers crossed, not praying on it. But also, too, it is to amplify the voices of women of color in this movement, which is done through the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, which is still slated to take place from September 25th through the 27th of this year. You will hear from some dynamic women of color in this movement, and also who are just doing some fantastic and important work as it pertains to human rights, whether it is LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, racial justice, and also the atheist identity, standing up for our community, which a number of us do. And so also, it isn't just about Black Non-Believers as an organization. For those of you who aren't aware, I also serve on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association. I also volunteer with Recovering from Religion. And those of you who follow the ACA and the programming, you may be very familiar with Dr. Darrel Ray, who is another wonderful human being and a very close colleague of mine. We respect each other's work. We work together, and this is amazing. And I also want to point out my co-organizers for Women of Color Beyond Belief, Dr. Sakibu Hutchinson, who is based out of Los Angeles, and Bridget Crutchfield, who is on the board for Black Non-Believers and who is the lead organizer for our Detroit affiliate. So If you aren't familiar with these women, I highly suggest that you become familiar and get to know our work. Please do support our organization. We are, along with the Atheist Community of Austin, we are a 501c3 organization, and donations to us are tax deductible. If you can see here, we do also have a online store that you can proudly sport our gear no matter who you are. We also have other merchandise for sale. That is, if you've ever, again, if you're familiar and if you've ever watched ACA programming, you've seen being mugs there. You've seen folks wearing our shirts. And so, again, it is important that even if you, as someone who is a non-person of color, is not at the center of, is not at the center of the focus, do understand that there are a number of us who are continuing to come out, and mutual support will be needed for not just those individuals, but also for the organization. So, in closing, I'd like for you to once again consider supporting the Atheist Community of Austin and its wonderful and diverse programming. Support organizations like Black Nonbelievers, in which there is a number of content. We provide in-person support and community in which everyone is welcome. We also advocate for open atheist and non-religious identification, because if people don't know where we stand, then they really may not know who we are at all. And again, it's important for us, even if you are the type of person who doesn't necessarily like to have those arguments, you feel like you may not be able to articulate it the same way someone like Matt would, or even myself would. It is important to provide that support for those of us who do. Many folks are coming out of the church and they're very jaded by their experiences, which is completely understandable. Religion, I do contend that it is problematic in our society. However, we must understand that as human beings, many of us do have many of the same goals, but that secular communities and organizations still need your support in order to fight these battles that we are facing. And understanding that, again, we don't exist in a vacuum. There are things that we work out, but we work them out with reason and compassion. They aren't enemies of each other. So once again, I'd like to thank you for having me. Please visit our website at blacknonbelievers.org. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.
Hello, this is Dr. Darrel Ray, President of Recovering from Religion and author of The God Virus and Sex and God. What does it mean to be an atheist activist? I think many people believe it is being a podcaster, going on the Atheist Experience, writing a book, a blog, or writing a letter to the editor. I can't deny those are forms of activism, but they're not the only forms, and they're certainly not something that everyone can or should do. Personally, I think atheist activism is getting shit done. Of course, I've done all the things I mentioned, podcasting, writing books, letters to the editor, and I'm glad I did them. But the thing I am most proud of are the things that make a demonstrable difference in people's lives. Don't hear me dissing all those wonderful people doing podcasts, YouTubers, bloggers, etc. I love all of them. But there's only so much need for those roles. You don't need to be a YouTuber or blogger to make any difference. Anyone can make a difference and advance the goal of reducing superstition in the world. I see atheist activism as anything where you can use your individual talents to make a demonstrable difference in someone's life or the lives of a group. If you only look at those who are out front making a splash, you might never recognize that you have a huge potential to influence many people even challenge entire systems. For example, one of the little things I enjoy doing is helping people write letters to local school districts when they violate church-state law. I also love finding people who are doing good work and writing a little note to them expressing my appreciation for their efforts. The people I most admire are my atheist colleagues who work every Monday helping the homeless here in my home city. The atheists who make a trip to the state capitol and talk to legislatures about LGBTQ rights with legislators are some people I admire. The atheists who run support groups for Black nonbelievers in cities all across the U.S. The atheists who clean up local parks. The atheists who build ramps for the handicapped or cut grass for elderly people. So the moral of my story is the real activists are in our community and are those that are getting shit done. I'm all about helping people learn to live the best lives they can. I'm about cleaning up the road near my home that my mostly Christian neighbors trashed. I'm about finding the good that people are doing and making sure they get recognized. I'm about volunteering for recovering from religion and chatting with people in need of help on the helpline. I think atheist activism is about building an ethic and habit of focus on community and support for others. There's so much to be done as an atheist activist, and it feels so good when you're doing it.
Ah, yes. It's Atheist Day in Austin, Texas, and I am celebrating it the traditional way one celebrates Atheist Day in Austin, Texas, by being in quarantine in Denver, Colorado. Yes, that is the tradition. If you aren't already aware, book your flights now. I'm sure you will have no problem getting a good flight to Denver, Colorado right now. I mean, if you do, it'll probably be on the cheap. No, it is true though. I am here in quarantine in Denver, Colorado, in my house. This is my little home set and studio, but still excited to celebrate Atheist Day with the Atheist Community of Austin, they are. Wow, this is so far just like a really great, just like a top-notch advocacy video. The Atheist Community of Austin is a fantastic organization that is so important to me because I am so much interested in seeing a world where atheism is talked about in a very positive light. And I think that they are pushing that idea of positive atheism, secular humanism, and just making us look a lot better than we really are. No, I'm kidding, Blake, but they sure do make us look good. Because that activism is really important, especially in times like these. Right now, we are fighting a pandemic in our country, and they're at the head of, and listen, I don't want to get too political here, but if you've ever seen my show, you should have expected it. At the head of the response team of the people we should be putting our trust in to make these decisions is a person who doesn't believe in evolution. A fact. Evolution is a fact. Is a person who is trying to pray the COVID away. This is the world we currently live in, where it is facts against fiction. It is science against not science. I mean, is there anything more not science than what said individual believes in? We need to be sticking up for truth, secularism, humanism, but also science. And I think it is more important than ever. This pandemic, I give up. No, this pandemic, it will pass. We will get through it. On the other side of it, most people, it looks like, will be alive. It's going to be hard because there is going to be loss, and we may all know somebody who either didn't make it or who is somebody close to someone who didn't make it. In fact, I'd say it's likely we will at least know somebody who was close to somebody who didn't make it. And after this is all said and done, the world will probably just go back to normal. And I think that's something we can't stand for. I think that we have to advocate for change, for a difference, to make things better. Because I dare say there are going to be people on the other side of this who receive their medications, who get to use these respirators that are in short supply. There are going to be people who quarantined. There are going to be people who isolated, who followed all of the medical guidelines. Medical science will hopefully catch up, probably not for a while, but with a vaccine, and all of those things will happen. And then there will be a huge group of people who just ignore that and thank God for delivery from this pandemic, something that it would have been a far greater blessing for him to never have let begun, but we'll thank him, in the aftermath. That's not something that we can then allow our country or the countries around the world to settle in on. We can't allow it to be that, oh, we did it. Thank God. Now let's go back to the status quo and not be prepared for the next one. Because we got kind of lucky that this pandemic doesn't have a much higher mortality rate. And truly, it is luck. The next one could be much, much worse. We could be talking about double-digit mortality rates, something that kills as bad as Ebola does, but it spreads as easily as this does. And we have to be prepared, and the way to be prepared is to advocate for those things that come from our secular values. Good, well-researched medical science. Right now, we're not just talking about advocacy of it would be so nice if there would be world peace, which obviously there would be. Don't take that as, I'm not trying to downplay how great world peace would be. It'd be great if there was unity. It'd be great if we could agree on more. It'd be great if we could all have the same standards of facts. But it'd also be great if we were prepared to survive. It'd also be great if everyone was as motivated to see the thriving of life on Earth, including human life. Instead, we are faced with a number of people who seem to be excited for the end of the world. That's what advocacy, when it comes to atheism, is about. That's the type of atheist advocacy I like to see. That which leads to the betterment of humans. That which makes us better. That which makes us healthier. That which makes us live longer. That which makes us love better. That's what I'm hoping for. And so that's a very, obviously, specific to the time. Obviously, also, I want to see another thing. If you've seen my channel, I'm a very big queer rights advocate, activist, and member of the queer community. Excuse me, I've just had a strawberry milkshake, and it makes me a little burpy. I could edit all of this stuff out, but wouldn't it be more fun if I didn't? I definitely want to see the world moving in a direction of empathy for everybody, with people who aren't so eager to get in the way of another person's rights on the basis of a belief that they cannot prove to be true. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there has to be limitations to what we allow people to do to each other. And it's a good thing that we can recognize that those limitations must exist. But upon what basis we determine those limitations has to be something we can all agree on. Because there seems to be these very basic things we can all figure out. We don't argue about whether or not ovens are hot. We have ways to prove it, and we all seem to accept it no matter what our history and our background is. Except for Milton. He's going to argue with everyone about everything. So forget Milton. I'm just kidding. If you're watching and your name's Milton, you're great. But if you're that Milton, screw you. We know that there are ways we can all come together and agree on certain things. We need to figure out what that standard is for these greater ideas, for these greater situations, for how we should treat each other and what the limitations on what humans can be allowed to do to each other are. It can't be upon these arbitrary grounds, these holy books, these beliefs that I just feel so deep in my heart are true, because at the end of the day, so many people believe things on that basis and they're contrary to each other. So how do we figure out what we all do, how we all treat each other? And so that's to me why being an activist in the atheist movement for good, positive things is so important. Because in a world where people have differing opinions based upon the religion that they belong to, we can say, hey, how about this message that needs no religion but can unify us all? That's what atheist activism means to me. This video was a bit rambly. I acknowledge that. But I didn't script anything. I took my cues from Mark. He said, give me 10 minutes on what atheist activism and advocation, and I don't even remember which word he actually used was. And now I'm 20 seconds away from achieving that goal. So the following are fruits I very much enjoy in order of how much I enjoy them. First, I gotta go with mangoes. Fantastic. Second, raspberries. Though growing up in a home with a British mother, they are certainly it's raspberries, but whatever. Either way, they're delicious. I also enjoy grapes, but I go through phases where I don't know which kind of grape I like the most. I think right now, if I was going for a grape, I'd probably go for a big, juicy black grape. But green grapes, that little tang, that little sour, not really tang, but that little sour bite, pretty good too. I also like strawberries, apples. We'll just do top 5. There you go. That's and you know what's funny is I more like using strawberries in things than eating a whole strawberry. But I think we've reached the 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Happy Atheist Day. Thank you to the Atheist Community of Austin for everything you do. You're absolutely fantastic. And I'm happy that more and more people are associating atheism and what we do and what we are out trying to accomplish with the kind of message that the Atheist Community of Austin is trying to spread. I'm glad that not everybody feels that way yet, but it is spreading, and it is spreading more rapidly because of the work the ACA does. So thank you very much to the ACA. Bye, everyone. Love you all. And look at that. I've gone well over the 10 minutes. We're at like 11 something.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jen Aldrich, host of Godless Bitches 3.0, produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, and host of the Atheist Winedown. Happy Atheist Day. For those of you who are new to our community, welcome. You are wanted and accepted here by so many who have walked very similar paths to yours. For those already in our community, thank you. It is you who have created a place of love, acceptance, and caring that so many have needed for so long. This year's event was originally supposed to be held at the Texas State Capitol building in Austin, Texas. Even with our events being held virtually, the significance of a place designed to create and uphold laws couldn't be ignored. Around the world, atheists are living in fear under laws governing them according to and influenced by faiths we no longer believe in. Many are having their autonomy, happiness, and lives taken from them simply for not believing. Others every day are facing lawmakers who are working diligently to make sure that their faith is law, stripping so many of being able to live as they are, based on faiths we no longer adhere to. Today, on our day, we are here to stand up and say we will no longer be silent. We will no longer stand for the days of pretending we do not exist out of fear of being ostracized or what may happen if we don't maintain the status quo. You cannot cast us out anymore. We are here as a community to support those you have thrown away for their beliefs and identities. We are here as voices for those who cannot speak to say we will no longer be controlled and ruled by faiths that have damaged and hurt us. To quote one of my favorite poems from author Darrel Thomas, Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. We will no longer go quietly into the darkness of being suppressed, hurt, judged, abused, abandoned, and damaged under faiths that tell us we are wrong for simply being who we are. We will no longer be cast aside and ostracized for using our brains as they were intended, to analyze, to question, to be skeptical of things presented before us. We will no longer live in fear simply by acting on how evolution has created us to be, to create, to love, to question, to understand. We are the light of the future, the light of acceptance, hope, equality, education, and love. We, in our quest for understanding, have become the light this world needs in a time of change, reason, and truth. We are the light of equality. We are the light of love. We are the light of acceptance. We are the light of those that refuse to be quiet and miserable. We are the light of those to stand up and say, everyone deserves to be happy. Everyone deserves to be equal. And everyone deserves to be loved. We are the light that are demanding hope, that are demanding that everyone can finally see who you are, who you love. What you question is not something that should be cast aside, is not something that should be ignored, but embraced and treated as equally as the person standing next to you. I thank you all for being here today. Without you, we could not be the voices we need to be. We could not have heard your stories, seen your compassion, heard your pain, and had our eyes open to the work that motivates us to speak for and build this community. For those of you that cannot speak, we are here to be your voices. We are here to hear your stories, and we are here to understand your pain. Thank you.
As we stockpile food and supplies, hold our families close, and isolate ourselves in our bunkers of solitude, I want to offer a glimmer of hope. The world is coming together in an unprecedented way to wage war against this common enemy. And thanks to increased global investments in medical breakthroughs and scientific research, we're winning. Due to scientific progress in gene sequencing, scientists were able to sequence the coronavirus faster than ever before in history, and scientists around the world were able to share information and promptly begin working on treatments and vaccines. As of March 16th, the Kaiser Permanente Washington Research Institute in Seattle has begun human testing on an experimental vaccine. And an immunologist at Johns Hopkins University is experimenting with the use of antibodies from recovered COVID-19 patients for use in a potential treatment of the virus. Australian researchers at the University of Queensland's Centre for Clinical Research have developed 2 drugs which wiped out all traces of the disease in test tubes, and they're now beginning testing on a nationwide trial. And Dutch and Canadian researchers have collaborated and managed to isolate the agent responsible for the spread of COVID-19, which will give researchers around the world better insights into the biology, evolution, and clinical shedding of the virus, and hopefully speed up the development of treatments and vaccines, as well as help researchers to develop better diagnostic testing. This is what we as humans can accomplish when we value and invest in science, when we work together to solve the greatest problems facing the human race. We will overcome. We can accomplish great things, and we can make prompt and effective progress. But before you take that for granted, I'd like to shine a little bit of light on the alternative pathway before us. The US religious response in the last month of this outbreak has been interesting. We've seen religious pseudoscience rear its ugly head in an unprecedented way. As the National Institutes of Health was predicting that as many as potentially 1.5 million deaths in the US alone could occur if drastic measures weren't taken, and as the CDC was begging people to stay home and practice social distancing, How were church leaders responding? Well, the author, international public speaker, and self-proclaimed apostolic prophet, Jennifer LeClaire, encouraged her congregation to not heed the CDC's advice, but to gather together in prayer, because we don't run away and isolate ourselves and quarantine ourselves and sit in our houses simply because we're afraid. We run to the church and we take authority over this demonic entity that's invading our city. And she went on to say that we get all of us here praying together, and we ain't none of us gonna get attacked by this dumb thing. Right, okay? But she was far from the only pastor with such catastrophically stupid faith-based advice. And as unemployment has begun to skyrocket, who's been there to bilk the desperate out of their last dime other than multimillionaire prosperity doctrine preachers like Trump's evangelical advisor, Kenneth Copeland, who told his viewers that whatever you do, don't you stop tithing. And the guy has multiple jets. How else is he gonna be able to pay for them? Or Trump's other multimillionaire spiritual advisor, Paula White, who painted her church as the essential hospital for the spiritually sick before asking her increasingly unemployed congregants to send her $91 donations or just $9 or whatever the Lord tells you to give. Meanwhile, she lives in a mansion. Thousands of pastors forgetting about the Black Death, bubonic plague, Spanish flu, smallpox, polio, SARS, MERS, H1N1, Ebola, etc., which we have survived all of, have warned their congregations that this right here is the end times, which totally didn't instill panic in anyone. At least, though, Pastor Chuck Pierce was there to reassure people that this wasn't the end times, just yet at least, because he's a prophet and God has shown him at least through the year 2026. This would almost be comical if so many people weren't so tragically affected by holy incompetence. And it's not just in the US. This religious menagerie isn't just limited to the borders of the United States. Known for its Young Earth Creationist Museum's life-size Noah's Ark recreations and Appalachian snake-handling pastors, religious incompetence and scientific illiteracy is a global pandemic. As far-flung as South Africa, just yesterday, spiritual healers were going door-to-door distributing their flyers for their traditional herbalist snake oil salesman services and telling people that if you're out of work because of COVID, can't afford to go to a hospital, no worries. For just a small fee, you can obtain a protection of charms, which is about as effective as a bulletproof vest made entirely of saran wrap. As the coronavirus spread through South Korea, Pastor Lee Man-hee, claiming to be the second coming of Jesus, decided to throw caution to the wind and ignore safety advisories. After his congregation was exposed to the virus, he then thwarted efforts to stop its spread by refusing to hand over a list of his church's members to the authorities. At the beginning of the month, over 60% of the 4,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Korea were members of his cult. He blamed the spread of the disease on evil. I agree. And as the coronavirus ravaged the Indian city of Qom, their local cleric Ayatollah Tabrizian denounced Western medicine as un-Islamic and joined the Hunbots of the MLM world recommending the halal alternative, smearing essential oils on your anus. Which would be hilarious, except for the fact that in the wake of this pseudoscientific religious advice, the virus has become such a problem in Iran that now someone is dying of COVID-19 every 10 minutes there. But at least grandma's corpse will smell like violet leaf oil. Meanwhile, Orthodox Jews in Beit Shemesh, Israel, ignored rules about social distancing. Hundreds of school kids gathered together declaring, "We're not scared," and sexist religious posters outside blamed the pandemic on their women wearing wigs made entirely of non-Jewish hair. How incredibly unkosher. But it's not just the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians. As we hunker down in our homes around the world trying to weather the storm and not spread the disease, Mormon congregations told their missionaries that this was an excellent time to go catch people in their homes and encouraged missionaries to go door to door knocking, even calling on some of their most vulnerable elderly patriarchs to bounce home to home, delivering blessings. We don't want them to spread their blessings to us. But nonetheless, they continue to take part in what I'm dubbing the Lord's contagion. As hundreds of thousands contract the potentially life-ending virus, their loved ones turn to God with prayers of intercession. If they recover, he's clearly good, loving, and gracious. If they die, well, he's just being mysterious again. The virus kills indiscriminately, though. It doesn't care what faith or creed you are. It doesn't care which gods you pray to. The only thing that's stopping it is scientific research into cures and vaccines, and the spread of science-based preventative information. And don't think you get a pass, Hindus. As India quarantined itself off from the rest of the world, Hindu activists held cow urine drinking parties where they guzzled the sacred kidney elixir of their bovine brethren. Holy cow! And one of the countries that was hit hardest by the virus has been Italy. As the health departments there took drastic measures to curb the COVID outbreak, the Pope, the world's most useless geriatric billionaire, staring down at the empty streets of the Vatican, assured Catholics around the world that he had met with God on his pilgrimage down the street to no less than 2 different churches, where he asked God to please stop the virus now. Unfortunately, per usual, God seems to be practicing social distancing. When thrust under the blacklight of scrutiny, we see the harmful traces of religious pseudoscience everywhere. And we have to ask ourselves, how have we been so complacent and comfortable with the spread of this mind virus? Religious insanity is a global pandemic. I understand that people are scared and they want reassurance in these uncertain times that things are going to be okay. People turn to prophets and psychics for words of insight about what the future holds, and time again, they're disappointed by charlatans and swindlers. But humanity will pull through this. We're strong and resilient. And what's more, we have a tremendous chance to learn from this going forward. This right here is an inflection point, a learning opportunity. As humanity bands together to find a cure and overcome this pandemic ravaging our planet, perhaps the loved ones that we lose won't have to die in vain. If and only if we can emerge from this with valuable lessons learned about the failure of spiritual superstition, prayer, and faith healing, and the danger of pseudoscience and religious dogma, exiting this dark tunnel with a newfound appreciation of the importance of scientific literacy and for our collective investment in education, medicine, vaccines, and other research and development initiatives. This is the only sane path forward. The alternative is grim. If we shamefully refuse to learn from past mistakes, we doom ourselves to swan dive our heads back into the dark age sand dunes, shoulder deep in religious and superstitious insanity. It's an easy choice. Human lives and the rate of human progress hang in the balance. The consequences have never been more dire, but the simultaneously empowering and terrifying reality is that this vital choice for humanity's trajectory is entirely up to us.
Hello, my fellow atheists. Welcome to Atheist Day. This is David Oliverio, the preaching humanist. My job is to educate people about secular humanism, promoting and advancing a beautiful worldview that is far above and beyond theistic religion. It is an alternative. So we as atheists, it is time for us to let other people know what we believe in rather than what we don't believe in. So my message is to promote this thing we call secular humanism for we who identify as atheists. So if you're an atheist and you're tired of people coming up to you and you have dialogue with people and they ask you, if you don't believe in God, then what do you believe in? You must believe in nothing. Well, through the many years of activism and talking to believers and non-believers, I have noticed that they do not understand the concept that you can have a fulfilled life, and we do believe in many wonderful things. Number one, we believe in love. Love is not a Christian virtue only. It is not a godly or a biblical or religious virtue. It is human. No God, no Bible, no Jesus, no religion is needed to define love nor to explain love. We have it innate in us as social animals. Number two, We believe in ethics and morals. How many times do we get that from people? If you're an atheist, how can you be moral and ethical? Why? We know because ethical values are derived from human need and human interest and tested by experience and the all-important consequences. We understand the concept of ethics and morals. We have it in us. Not long ago, at the Atheist Community of Austin booth, I and others have set up a booth at Market Days in Georgetown, Texas. I hold up my signs, and one of the signs I had says, secular humanism, good and moral without God, without belief in a God. A man about 30, 40 feet away, I get this all the time, looked at me, yelled out, "No way that'll ever happen." And I said, "What is that, sir?" He said, "You cannot be good without God. Only God and Jesus is good." And of course, as I always do, I answered him and said, with a smile on my face, I said, "Sir, you're wrong. We just got finished feeding homeless people before we came out here to set up the table. We must let people know that we believe in ethics and morals." Now, churches are very, very good at answering existential questions that humans have. Well, how did we get here? What's the meaning in life? What's purpose in life? How do you find ethics and values and fulfillment and happiness and love and so forth without belief in a God? There's a particular church right down the street from the ACA studio, and they're brilliant marketers. I used to be one of those preachers in the 70s and 80s, and I remember that. When you drive down past their church, they have signs out there. And it says, "You belong here. You are loved. If you come here, you will find meaning in life. You're going to be happy here. You'll have community." They're good at promoting and answering these questions. We have the same thing. We can answer them. We have something positive rather than talking about what we don't believe all the time. We need to tell them what we do believe in. We believe in having a fulfilled life, servicing other people. If there's a void in one's life, we don't have one of those God-shaped holes. That's what preachers like to talk about. Well, without Jesus, you got a God-shaped hole in you. You need to have fulfillment. We do have life fulfillment. Benefiting others, helping other people, finding things you love to do, and like icing on the cake, it makes it even better when you benefit and help other people. So we can have a fulfilled life. Number 4, we believe as atheists and secular humanists that humans are social by nature and find meaning in relationships. Another question they like to have. Well, how do you find meaning in life if you're an atheist? Let me quote from a very intelligent man, my friend Dr. Anthony Penn from Houston, a fellow atheist and a fellow secular humanist. "The markers of meaningful existence are only measured within the context of something larger than yourself." Well, David, that sounds Christian. You sound like an old preacher again. Hey, we do that in reality. We have something to share with people. Now, one more thing. This is one that I get all the time. "Well, David, you're an atheist. You can't be happy. There's no way you could be happy without having a relationship with God through Jesus Christ." We as atheists and we as secular humanists believe that benefiting society maximizes individual happiness. Yes, happiness and joy without belief in a God. I've seen it many times when people go out with me or others to feed homeless people, do whatever you can for others. It does make you feel good because we're social animals. It's in us to do that. Let me tell you a little story. And I run into people all the time when I'm out with activism. And not only that, in my day-to-day adventures, going out to my clients' homes and so forth. I went into an Apple store to get my iPhone fixed because I don't know a lot about technology. Most people know that. And I'm going to tell you a story about Apple Store Baptist deacon. And Apple Store Baptist deacon was on a mission. He was out to save souls and let them know about the light of Jesus Christ, right? So I walked in, make a long story short, and I told the young guy up front, I said, look, I'm an old dude. I don't know much about technology. Help me out here, young man. I made him laugh. So he went down and sat me at a table waiting for the next available employee to come help me with my lack of technology. And he sat me down in a table with about 6 or 7 youngsters, the millennials, right? And I like to be around them. They're smart. And I noticed there was a gentleman probably younger than me, but he was probably in his 40s or 50s. And he was telling this young person next to him about his relationship with his wife. He said, I'm blessed. I thank God for my relationship with my wife now of 20 years, whatever. So I looked at him. I said, good morning, sir. And he goes, hi. And he started it off on me. I knew where Apple Store Baptist deacon was headed. And he said, yes, I have a relationship with my wife because of my relationship with God. And I went, here's an opportunity to share with this man. And I did. I said, well, sir, that's really great. I said, I'm sure you have a lot in common, but I and my sweetie pie, Christine, are about to get married. Now, this was just past summer. We got married. And I said, and we are both atheists. And I've never been happier. And I said that. He looked at me. He didn't like that. He said, sir, that is impossible. And I said, what is that, sir? What's so impossible? He said, it is impossible for an atheist to be happy. Well, I went on and I noticed I had a whole crowd of people. And knowing me with my preacher years ago, the more people, the better. So I said, sir, let me explain to you something. And I explained to him how you can find happiness in life, many ways, without belief in a God. So my fellow atheists, let's go out there and let our light of secular humanism shine. And let's tell people that there's something positive in this. It's not only what we don't believe. There are wonderful things that we believe. As humans, we have shared values and interests and ethics, even with believers. They don't know that. Let's go out there and tell them these things. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Hey everyone. Today, we celebrate our second International Atheist Day. And unlike last year, we're broadcasting from our homes. You see, the steps of the Texas State Capitol, where we're supposed to be, like so many other capitals, is empty right now, as we buckle down and weather the storm that is the COVID-19 coronavirus. I know I wasn't expecting this. I had a different speech planned for today, but that speech is going to have to wait for another time. Check your news feeds right now, and you'll find that the Jim Bakkers of the world are making a tidy profit off of our fears, selling us buckets of slop and cure-alls to those who are the most vulnerable among us. Because for just $29.95 each month, you can forgo your insurance, apparently. And that last paycheck that you got, well, that's not rent money, that's seed money. And planting that seed will multiply your wealth if you just give it to one of those shady-ass preachers and wish hard enough, apparently. It tastes bad to say. You see anti-vax groups passing along prayer chains like modern-day curanderas, burning incense to place a ward of protection over their homes. And all while thanking God, and not the people braving the outbreak to bring us essential services. You know, to those of you on the front lines of this outbreak, staffing overcrowded hospitals and clinics, stocking food and keeping the lights on, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. You're doing your part, and now we need to do ours. If you have availability in the coming weeks, please consider reaching out and volunteering with the Hotline Project by going to recoveringfromreligion.org. They will train you. You can be a listening ear for someone in need. And in doing so, be an active part of providing some of those resources that are desperately needed right now. And I've read the messages, and I'm in the forums. And so many people right now are having to stay with fundamentalist family members to get through this. So many people unable to come out as atheists, because right now it is dangerous, especially now. You're fighting your own battle right now. We see it. And there's no shame in waiting until it's a safe time to come out. We'll be here. Promise. On YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and Reddit. I still see us. We're gathering. We're reaching out, unbound from the borders that are isolating us. Because when local communities can't gather, the atheist community of everywhere still does. And we're igniting that fire to see and lead the way to a better tomorrow. So if you've been planning on starting a podcast or a YouTube channel, now is an amazing time to get it started. Not only is it a great skill to learn, but we need more voices, and we need them today. You get experience by trying. Don't worry about not having experience. I can tell you that helping others through becoming a content creator has been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. A community does not need to be large to be worthwhile, and your voice might resonate with someone that mine doesn't. And if it even helps just one person through a tough time, it's worth it. Because we need to be there to say that you are not alone. We don't need to leave our homes to make an impact. Hell, we don't even need to put on pants. We're still finding that comfortable place between overworking ourselves and sitting with nowhere to go during social isolation. Keep that passion alive and let your voice shine out. And let those voices be 1,000 beacons to let everyone know that while it may not feel that way, you're not alone. So let's make this time a vigil for the world that we still need to build. By holding accountable those people who can make a change. By demanding that they stick to evidence-based solutions when passing legislation. By illuminating bad ideas. By thanking those people who are working tirelessly to keep us safe. And by reminding everyone that human hands solve human problems. Let this Atheist Day be the one that helped you find your voice. Because I, for one, I can't wait to hear it.
The Secular Student Alliance supports high school and college organizations that seek to build a community based on secular values. All SSA chapters operate under the ideas of community, advocacy, service, and education. As founder and president of the Maverick Secular Society at UT Arlington, I know how valuable their support has been in growing our community from the ground up. Since day one of starting this organization, the SSA has been readily available to answer questions, provide feedback, and offer advice on how we can grow our community to the best it can be. They also provide us with swag, including pens, stickers, buttons, and informational secular brochures that we hand out on campus. They've helped us secure guest speakers, including Dan Barker from FFRF, and provide us with ongoing leadership trainings and opportunities. The SSA truly is an alliance of secular students dedicated to growing, collaborating, and advocating together.
Hey everybody, ObjectivelyDan here, and as you can tell, I'm not in the ACA studios. I'm actually filming this from my apartment. So the ACA was having some electrical stuff done this week, and it turns out the repairs weren't going to be done in time for us to be able to film Truth Wanted on Friday. So I'm recording this video ahead of time because, man, what a week it's been. I've heard so many conspiracy theories about the coronavirus, everything from it's a population bomb set up by China to a deliberate attack from the Democrats to make Donald Trump look bad. And I know there's a lot of misinformation going out there right now, but I think it's important to talk about what it means to be a skeptic in times like this, because I'm trying to figure out that role for myself. Probably like you guys, I've been feeling over the last couple of days like, man, there's a lot of stuff happening and it doesn't feel like I have a lot of control over what's going on. Like, I'm just one person. How can I, contribute to help out? Because I even feel anxious and scared about this situation myself sometimes, just thinking about it, because it's like, oh yeah, if I get it, I might be fine. But what about the people that I love that may be more susceptible? Or what's going to be the economic impact of this at the end? Are there going to be people like my friends or myself who aren't going to have the same kind of work that we usually do? What's going to happen? So I think for right now, the best thing we can do as skeptics is to look at the information coming to us critically and evaluate the sources that we have, and try to get as best of a clear picture as we can, because everybody's talking about this stuff and a lot of people have a lot of bad ideas, some of which has already killed people. There was a story from Iran where over 40 people drank alcohol, like pure alcohol, because they had heard that the coronavirus would be basically explicated from the body if you drank alcohol or something. Like, you know, the misinformation really has an effect on people, and people's beliefs motivate them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And we have to be the ones to think critically about this stuff. We have to be the ones to tell other people, hey, look, here's some other places you can look at that are saying differently. Here's some better sources than maybe what you're looking at that can are in general more reliable. Because like right now, we're definitely going through something, and things are going to be changing. But that doesn't mean that we have to panic. It doesn't mean that we can't still make decisions ourselves that are good for us based on the information that we get. So I just wanted to make this short video kind of, giving you guys something positive to think about, and a role that you can play in this situation that I'm trying to play myself. I'm definitely talking to the people that I worked with and saying, hey, well, this is what this source is saying, and this is what's really going on. Because, again, I'm hearing a lot of ideas from people that just aren't true and can be demonstrably shown to not be true. And this shows Truth Wanted, right? Like, we want to know the truth. We want to be able to help people with figuring out how they can figure out the truth themselves. So I'm open on Twitter for DMs. If you guys want to talk to me about your fears. It's at ObjectivelyDan, and you can email me too. It's truthwanted@atheist-community.org, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. But as of right now, the show for Friday the 20th is not going to happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen with future shows. Right now, the only reason why we couldn't do it was because of some electrical stuff. Didn't have to do anything with the coronavirus stuff. We'll see if Austin takes some more serious measures and we can't do anything like that. But for right now, we're still planning on making content for you guys. So just want to give you guys this quick update and a smile to remember to always keep wanting the truth, okay? Because there's good people out there in the world. I know it's kind of hard to see that sometimes, but there are good people who are willing to fight this and willing to fight the misinformation that's out there as well, to help people think rationally about this. Because the last thing we want to do is make decisions on bad information. So anyway, that's just my update on this. I'm Objectively Dan. Thank you guys for watching Truth Wanted, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hello, puppies and kittens. I'm sorry that on this annual celebration of Atheist Day, I could not be there in Austin to meet and sup with y'all in person, but I know you're all surviving the plague of our time. Damn it, dog. The dog is trying to remove the soul or squeaky thing out of its toy. I apologize. This thing is determined to ruin every type podcast I do. Anyway, as I said, I hope you're all surviving the plague of our time. And I know these conditions are unprecedented. What is with that dog? You want your own show? Go! For those of you wondering, it's a Great Pyrenees. Ah! Shut up! Damn. I know these conditions are unprecedented if you ignore the Spanish flu of a century ago, but like so many other things, the first time won't be the only time. We will face other similar trials, probably repeat. Honey, lock that dog up. What was I saying? Like so many things, the first time won't be the only time. We will face other similar trials probably repeatedly over the course of the next century or so, because climate change is a thing. It is anthropogenic, and there are consequences in our inability to see how things add up. But that's why we invented a religion that allows us to avoid all responsibility, where we don't have to actually help anyone. We can just literally wish upon a star that they'll accidentally get the help that they need, and that we don't have to actually donate money or effort to that end. Likewise, we don't have to be accountable for anything either. It doesn't matter if you serial molested 4 out of your 10 siblings, because if the judge is another wanna believer like you, then you might be able to avoid jail time if you just say that your magic imaginary friend has forgiven you. And why wouldn't he? He already knows exactly why you did all the stupid things that you do. He fully understands and accepts all your bullshit excuses because he is you. And that's why your own personal Jesus never knows more than you do. And he also believes the same falsehoods you do. If you thought that the First World War was fought in 1776, then your God thinks so too, because your God is just as stupid as you. That's why he hates everything that you hate. Man created God in his own image, and we put his word into his mouth in the scriptures that we scribed, telling us to be fruitful and multiply, to dominate and subdue the earth. Our sacred fables never said anything about implementing a different policy once we doubled the global population, as we did a century ago. And then that number doubled again. And then that number doubled again, just over the course of a single lifetime, such that the combination of our food and energy consumption is killing off the majority of plant and animal species on land or in the sea. If we allow willfully ignorant reality deniers to remain in charge, then the Anthropocene extinction event will likely rival even the great dying that divides the Permian and Triassic. Because our population growth is exponential, unsustainable, meaning that the more times like these are on the way, and it's likely to get much worse as different catalysts and calamities each demand their own unprecedented responses, which we have not yet devised. Don't ever get a great pair of knees. Not if you have a recording job. So, our beloved president fired our pandemic response team, saying that no one could have predicted that there would actually be a pandemic, except for whoever created a pandemic response team. I think they might have guessed that something like this would happen. But remember that Trump said that his pandemic, this pandemic, was a Chinese hoax. He said global warming was a Chinese hoax too. And the reality of that mistake will hit us even harder than this one already is. Interestingly, the reason that antibiotics work on bacteria but not on viruses is because bacteria is alive. It's biotic. But viruses don't quite qualify as life because they can't maintain the internal chemical balance known as homeostasis. Nor are they quite dead, because even though they're not quite alive, they can still be killed. So in a sense, this is a zombie apocalypse, one in which the undead can only be defeated by hoarding toilet paper. I'm luckier than most because I work from home. I no longer have to live off daily tips or cash payments like I used to. I've also been taking college classes online before every other student in the country was forced to. I'm taking classes from Arizona State University's School of Human Evolution and Social Change. Go Sun Devils. I went with ASU partly because I was named after a sun god, and partly because I thought it was appropriate that a seemingly satanic atheist activist should be a sun devil. This year, I took courses in archaeology, paleontology, primatology, cultural and physical anthropology, and now I'm taking courses distinguishing legitimate science from pseudo-archaeology. They're actually talking about all those fake fossils of giants that you might have seen pictures of but can't touch the real thing because there is no real thing. And this course also talks about at least one of Ron Wyatt's hoaxes. And not the one where he pretended to find the exact site of Jesus's crucifixion and his actual blood and the Ark of the Covenant all in the same place at the same time, but the one where he said that a pile of dirt on Mount Ararat was really Noah's Ark. If you've seen the images of it, that vaguely boat-shaped mound of mud at the Drupanar site is shaped like a canoe because snow melts and flows down either side. If you look for it, you can even find photos of another canoe-shaped ark close to the bigger one. Wyatt never mentions that one because his favorite fairy tale doesn't allow for it. So I'm sure to have fun with that class. And all of these classes have to refer to Charles Darwin for various reasons. And consequently, all of them also have to explain that a scientific theory is not just a drunken idea or a blind guess of baseless speculation like every revelation of religious truth always turns out to be. Instead, each of my college courses teaches that a scientific theory is an explanation of a body of facts, an explanation that has been rigorously tested and passed every test. In other words, a scientific theory is like a hypothesis that has been effectively proven by an overwhelming preponderance of evidence beyond reasonable doubt. Because they have to explain all that, they've also had to stress that accepting and understanding science doesn't mean that you can't still believe in a God if you really want to. It's just that biblical mythology cannot be a literal history of things that really happened as described, because none of those atrocious legends are evidently true, and most of them contradict everything we actually do know and can prove to be real. Some of these classes have even had to explain that the only way we can know anything at all is if we assume that the universe is real, rather than pretend that we're all figments of God's imagination, wherein nothing is real, including us, and therefore nothing means anything, and no one can ever really know anything either, not even the people who already believe in that particular God, as if such a thing was possible. It's not. But a lot of people like the idea that no one can really know anything because that means that they get to make believe in their favorite phantasm. But the rest of us would rather understand reality. So we're comfortable assuming that there is a reality or that reality is real, because even if everything is just an illusion, like in the Matrix, we still have to obey the laws of this particular video game, whether we're player characters or NPCs. It's still our reality. So there's effectively no difference between real and virtual in that hypothetical absurdity. And just remember that anything that exists outside our reality does not exist in reality. And if it exists beyond time, then at no time does it exist. I have to be pragmatic and assume that even if I assume that reality is real, as it evidently and logically is, especially given both Occam's and Hitchens' razors, that even if everything we perceive is only a virtual illusion, the fact remains that a line of footprints in the sand still means that someone walked there, and fossil bones are still evidence of an extinct animal, whether this reality is the real one or not. So there is neither purpose nor value in idealism. Honestly, there's no version of God that makes any sense or has any value, or that isn't somehow a contradiction of itself. Look at our current situation. We've got all these evangelical faith-healing churches voluntarily closing their doors because of a virus they know they can't cure. That's a clear admission that they know they're full of shit, that all this holiness is just make-believe by pretenders. Then, after enough people pointed out that little bit of hypocrisy, we have a few other churches offering to lay hands on hundreds of infected elderly, knowing that that's how this disease spread far and wide in the first place. It spread all over South Korea from a single church service. And here in the States, 45 people were infected in one service where they sprayed holy water into everyone's mouth using the same squirt gun. The Lord works in delirious ways. Ignorance and hypocrisy abound in religion, such that now we have even more faith healers pretending to heal people remotely through their TV screens, but still demanding that those people risk infection by physically going down to the church to slide their tithing under the door, because these self-appointed spokesmen for God want everyone to think that they really care about humanity. Not if you don't send that check to Paula the Great White Hypocrite, because she's the president's advisor to things no one ever actually knows anything about, and certainly not her ignorant, self-serving ass. Notice also that no one ever prophesied any of the unprecedented events that have ever happened in our lives. Hopefully most of us will make it through these unexpected challenges. I hope to get through this. I'm being careful. I'm also not going to complain too much, because if karma exists, maybe God is Rod Serling, and he wrote the Twilight Zone episodes that we're all living through. And most of all, understand that I'm not promoting hatred. I never have. No one cares what you hate, and neither should you. It's only the things that we love that will endear you in someone else's memory, and that's the nearest to immortality that we can hope for. I've always thought that a positive attitude helps maintain a healthy perspective, and that makes life more livable. So if you can't appreciate something positively, at least allow yourself to be impressed. I am.
Hello, my name is Christy Powell. I'm a gender and sexuality therapist here in Austin with Valence Counseling, and I help to host Secular Sexuality for the Atheist Experience Network, Thursdays at 7 Central. When I was a kid, my dad used to point out Darwin fish car decals as a preamble to a lecture on the evils of the world, which, to his mind, mostly boiled down to the Clintons' use of the United Nations to establish a new world order because of something child pornography. Conspiracy theories aside, he was strangely fascinated with the question of why atheists bother to announce their sins to the world, to hold rallies, to organize. What could they possibly have to offer the world? What would they even get together to talk about? After atheists are done rubbing their hands together and plotting the assault on Christmas, what was there to discuss and fellowship about? Did they really need to just sit around and consider how there still isn't a God? Even after my skepticism, my education in psychology, my love of queer films shook me loose from his line of thinking, I honestly wondered the same thing. Why do atheists form clubs and communities? Why not join a political movement or donate your 1%, your 10% to some sort of charity? For 25 years of Christianity, I've been taught that religion was the enemy, that rules and creeds, rituals and command chains were all part of a ploy to distract us from a relationship with God. Atheism, just like Islam, Buddhism, Catholicism, and even most Christians, was seen as just another religion, another way of corrupting our innate desire for a connection to perfect love. Plenty of more eloquent, better informed speakers can debunk the idea of atheism as another world religion, but I always come back to those two ideas of organizing and connecting. Aside from our war on Christmas and our inexplicable love of Monty Python, what do atheists actually have in common? Why should we be activists together? For all the many reasons that people are naming, you should know that LGBT youth are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. 40% of all trans adults report having made a suicide attempt. Queer Americans have nearly double the average unemployment rate and twice the food insecurity that the rest of America faces. In countries all around the world, people still face a lack of marriage access, can be kept from work, from being out, from organizing, from being safe. Every day in my counseling office, I work with people who are in the minority because of who they love, how they dress or present to the world. And in every one of those conversations, I hear about people being hurt because of some unquestioned and unchallenged idea of right and wrong, of good and evil. When we come together as a community of atheists, we put pressure on our world to make decisions, to make policies based not on our guts or our spirit or our divine instructions, but based on our understanding. We challenge the world to ask itself, why and how do you know? To do away with careless assumptions and magical thinking. When atheists join their voices together, we remind the world that they aren't going to get to someday stand in front of some home team deity to justify their actions. They're standing in front of their fellow man now. Each of us is responsible not to God or to some imaginary idea of right and wrong or to some magical book, but to each other. When atheists can organize, we can remind the world that judgment isn't some far-off day of reckoning, that we are, all of us, being held accountable for the way we treat our children, our poor, our vulnerable, our fellow humans. And when we organize into a community, we can find connection. we can actually create a piece of that divinity that our species has sacrificed so much for in the name of God by finding love and intimacy and connection right here with one another. Even at a time when we feel most isolated, we can pull together and find closeness and purpose without lying to ourselves or to one another. Thank you for being a part of this community and for helping us to act towards a better world.
Hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty, president of the Atheist Community of Austin and host of the Atheist Experience TV show. And while I hoped to be doing this talk on the steps of the Capitol in Austin, instead I'm shooting it from my backyard where I'm kind of in a little bit of a quarantine. But as I noted in the introduction to this event earlier, we will not be stopped. Over the 15 years that I've hosted the Atheist Experience, I've had the opportunity to interact with many people from all around the world. I've heard from people who are theists and who wish to have conversations. Some of them only want to preach. Some of them seem incapable of having conversations, and some of them are genuinely interested in moving the conversation forward. I want to talk to those people today, the people who are potentially allies of the godless. In the years that I've done this show, in the years that I've participated in the atheist community, I've also had the opportunity to hear from many atheists who feel alone, who feel ostracized. I've dealt with couples who have changed their religious views, or one of the partners has changed their religious views, and they're dealing with the stress this has put on their relationship. I've dealt with couples who are dealing with this with respect to how they should raise their children. On a regular basis, we get telephone calls from people who, no longer having a religious belief, but once having such a belief, now have to deal with, how do I interact with my family members? Will they still love me? Will they toss me aside? There are a number of great organizations like Recovering from Religion that have been established, and individual communities like the Atheist Community of Austin, which are here as landing places for people who, after giving up religion or after having decided that they need to participate in a community of people who have no religion, needed places like that. I've spoken to children who've been thrown out of their homes, teenagers ostracized by their parents, had their bags and belongings tossed out into the front yard, where we had to find new homes for them to live in because the parents would not tolerate an atheist child. Through the course of all these conversations, it's become clear that while I live in an incredibly prosperous, privileged country where I don't have to suffer and I don't have to fear reprisal when I speak my mind, that we still have a long way to go. I do the show from Austin, Texas. I don't have any great fear that religious zealots are going to come storming into the building and, beat me up. Around the world, that's not the same. There are individuals who merely for posting a non-religious Facebook message or blog post legitimately fear for their lives. In my country, the fear is of being alone. The fear is of being viewed as someone unworthy of love, unworthy of family, unworthy of community. And that's why we in the atheist community will continue to build communities, continue to provide places for people to interact. The ostracizing that takes place doesn't happen with every religious identity equally. Not everyone fears what their family's going to say. But it's sufficient enough that it impacts whether or not an atheist is likely to get elected to office, whether or not secular views are taken seriously in legislation, despite the fact that in the United States, we have, in our Constitution, in the law, a secular system, perhaps the first potentially glorious secular government, where you are free to hold your religious views, you are free to practice your religious views, and the only imposition from the government on your religious actions is when they come in conflict with other people's rights. One of the biggest problems, though, is that the majority religions aren't in any way forced or expected to view things in that light by virtue of their might, their popularity. They just presume that the rest of the world needs to act the way they want the world to act. We have children who are told that they are broken, that they're born sinful, that they're destined to hell. I've heard from people in their 70s who, despite being an atheist for decades, still wake up from nightmares of a hell they were taught to believe in when they were just children. We produce a TV show where people can call in, have those conversations. Some of them go well, some of them don't go particularly well. I travel the country doing lectures and debates, debating apologists from every corner of the globe. Some of those conversations are productive, some of them aren't. But that's the academic portion of this. It's the people portion that my secular humanism drives me to address. The people who are ostracized, the people who are made to suffer mental anguish, physical anguish, and even the fear of death. You are not broken. You are not bad. You are not immoral. You are not inferior. You are none of those things merely because you are not convinced of one of the many shared cultural delusions that our societies prop up as the pinnacles of virtue. Their claim that they have some divine right and superly imposed morality. Any of us who don't share a God as a foundation are somehow repugnant. Somehow God has given us over to a reprobate mind. We're broken. We are inferior. We are immoral. It doesn't matter what we do. As the psalm said, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They can do no good thing. Ancient holy texts have mistreated, misrepresented, and maligned non-believers from the beginning. And while it may not feel like it, religious individuals are the true first-tier victims of religion. The oppression that they impose is a manifestation of their fears and their insecurities. Their divisive us and them actions deserve our unified opposition in support of equality. And they, on a personal level, deserve our pity and compassion. This isn't a call for meekness. I'm not the meek atheist, and anyone who's seen the show can attest to that. You are correct to be angry at what has been done on behalf of religious identity. You should argue. You should engage. You should be passionate and be strong and unflinching in your support of equality and an end to religious privilege and religious oppression. That righteous anger, tempered with compassion, is the key to helping them out of the dark mire, and then their hands, instead of being folded in useless prayer, formed into a fist, or fashioning the weapons and words used to oppress the next generation of non-believers, can be the hands that help us, help others, live in a better world tomorrow. We've already started. We've built communities. We've produced content. We have engaged. We have worked to elect representatives that will represent all of us fairly. I would never advocate legislation to forcefully end religion, but legislation that ends religious oppression and religious privilege is a must. I would never engage with someone and desperately try to convince them that their religion is wrong unless they were willing to have the conversation. On our show, we make outgoing calls. We don't make outgoing calls. We take calls as they come in. But we need atheists internationally to stand up for equality. to advocate for atheist normalcy so that people know that their next door neighbor, who they like, is a non-believer and isn't a monster. And so that our religious friends, relatives, and neighbors can be freed of the dogma and doctrines that have kept the world shackled for far too long. Please, atheists around the world, be out and be outspoken. And religious individuals who are interested in equality and fairness and discussion, join with us in making sure that while everyone is free to practice their beliefs to the extent that they don't interfere with other people's lives, we are all working towards a truly better tomorrow where I never have to have another conversation with a 15-year-old kicked out of his home and a community desperate to find a new place for that kid to live just because his parents are the victims of religious dogma and are spreading that bigotry on. Thank you.
Happy International Atheist Day 2020. I'm sorry we couldn't be together in person, but our community made the right call and moved the event online. There are more people on the internet anyway. And thanks to this whole self-quarantine situation, I've got a captive audience. So buckle up, because you're about to listen to a millennial discuss the importance of labels. One of the first things I realized after leaving my Christian faith was how amazing the human brain is. When I was a Christian, I was terrified of my brain. It was full of dangerous thoughts, lustful desires, and insufficient answers to important questions. You know the verse, take every thought captive, yada yada. Now that I'm an atheist, though, I'm endlessly fascinated by the power of the brain. After all, brains create gods. One of the most important elements of the brain is its ability to categorize things. Our ability to recognize each other, to predict outcomes, to read literature and appreciate art, to build community, is a result of this superpower. And it is a superpower. Brains are better at categorizing than they are at almost anything else, and they do so at a subconscious level. When we do become aware of it, and when we harness it for our own ends, it becomes even more powerful. But we know this. Religions have been doing this for a very long time, and to great success. They categorize things into very simple, dogmatic boxes, and then they label those boxes. Right and wrong, good and evil, dark and light, saved and damned. Going outside those boxes is literally unthinkable. If you are not one, then you are by default the other. You know the verse, "He who is not with me is against me." The practice of labeling other people is dangerous. The most horrendous atrocities in history were predicated on this practice. Those in the halls of power, labeling the people who stood outside. Sometimes it was intentional, sometimes it was instinctual, and often it was a combination of both, but no matter what the motive was, the outcome was always the same. Disenfranchisement, discrimination, suppression, and a lack of equality. Atheists have experienced this for a long time and continue to this day. Here in America, we are underrepresented in our government bodies. We are routinely erased from the social and political spheres we occupy, and our ways of life are encroached on daily by religious overreach at both the state and federal levels. Depending on where we live, we are called dangerous, perverted, demonic. We are shunned from our communities, kicked out of our houses. Internationally, the story gets even more grim. If you are unlucky enough to be an atheist in some countries, your citizenship can be revoked. You can be beaten, kidnapped, imprisoned, even executed by your own government, simply for thinking freely. Now, considering the painful experiences with labels that atheists have had, it makes sense why we would instinctively reject them. Labels are dangerous. They cause division. They encourage myopic thinking and stymie independent perception. And this is all true when labels are applied to us by others. But there's a whole other side to this story, one which we would be foolish to ignore: the power of labels to create movements and demand attention. We often make fun of Christians for their many denominations. And anyone who comes from a religious background knows you aren't just a Christian, right? You're a Protestant or a Catholic or a Mormon. You're a Methodist or an Episcopalian or a Presbyterian or a Southern Baptist or a non-denominational follower of Jesus Christ, like I was. But when it comes time to be counted, to exert their will on the rest of the world, they know how to let go of those differences and stand together as Christians, as theists. That's the label they use to get shit done. And it works. Us? We're also not just one thing. We're agnostics, free thinkers, skeptics, secular humanists, Satanists, brights, and religious nuns, to name just a few. But until we have that banner to unite under, until we have that one label that when push comes to shove we can stand behind and shout with one voice, then we're going to remain scattered, uncountable, and powerless to exert our influence to change the world. And I'm not saying that atheist has to be the label we use, but it is a good one. It's honest, it's straightforward, it's inclusive, and maybe most notably, it strikes fear into the hearts of our opposition. If they are going to make us into monsters who possess supernatural powers of darkness, I say, why don't we use that to our advantage? They've given us a lot of power with this label. Power we didn't ask for and frankly we don't want. But you know the verse. With great power comes great responsibility. Perhaps the most important thing we can do with this power is to make something necessary and beautiful. A world that does not, cannot, hide behind holy edicts to mask hate and fear. And maybe in the future, we can get to a place where each one of us will be known only for our unique selves, leaving labels far behind. I would like to work towards that future. But we aren't there yet. I know that's an exhausting thing to hear. We always seem to be not quite there, and we're tired of almost. I get it. But we need to play by the rules that society has set up, the rules that are supported by our evolutionary psychology. Until this future comes to pass, we are fighting against those who would like nothing better than to keep those boxes, that binary kind of thinking, firmly in place. We need to organize. But before we can do that, we need to categorize. We are atheists. We are a community. And we will be counted.
Hey, I'm Seth Andrews. I'm host of thethinkingatheist.com. The Thinking Atheist is not a person, it's an idea. I'm a former evangelical. I came out of a faith culture. Fake it till you make it. Faith over knowledge. And now here on the other side of the looking glass, I want to pursue knowledge. And that's what the Thinking Atheist represents. Let's pursue the evidence. Let's use our brains, use reason. Let's think about these things. I've been thinking a lot about the theocrats in power as we approach the 2020 election. And here on Atheist Day 2020, I wanted to dwell a little bit on some of the invocations that we give from the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. We talk a lot about state-church separation. We don't always understand where some of these things come from. So for just a few minutes, here's kind of a layman's look at the backstory. And I want to start by going back in time. It's the 7th of October, 1801. Thomas Jefferson, newly elected president, right? The ink on the Constitution's not even dry yet. The American experiment still very fresh. And there was a group called the Danbury Baptists, and they were a smaller denomination of Baptists, and they were nervous. They were nervous that they were going to be discriminated against by the larger group of Baptists called the Congregationalists, right? We don't want to become second-class citizens. It's all kind of new out there. We don't know what's happening. Let's write a letter to Thomas Jefferson, and let's get some assurances that we'll still have a seat at the table. Right? We won't be discriminated against because we are a minority religion. And so They wrote this famous letter to Jefferson. They said these words, "Our sentiments are uniformly on the side of religious liberty." And they were using the words religious liberty in the accurate context, right? We want to be able to practice our faith and do our thing and interpret the Bible in this particular way without experiencing religious discrimination here in the United States. And so Thomas Jefferson wrote the famous reply, the letter to the Danbury Baptist, where he said this, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, who declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, this building a wall of separation between church and state." There it is, right? The line that we so often go to. Thomas Jefferson invoking the wall of separation between church and state. Pulpit preachers love to invoke Thomas Jefferson. I've never understood this. Like, Thomas Jefferson is the same guy who was called by Federalists a howling atheist because of his strong criticisms of organized religion, even organized Christianity. Thomas Jefferson, who once described himself as being of a sect by myself as far as I know, meaning he didn't line up with any other orthodoxies. He was kind of doing his own thing, marching to his own tune. This is the same Thomas Jefferson who is responsible for the Jefferson Bible. Thomas Jefferson took the early incarnation of an X-Acto knife, I guess, or razor blade, and he went through and sliced out all of the supernatural stuff, including Jesus's miracles and resurrection. Just cut them out of the Bible. And this Bible is currently on display. You can go see it at the Smithsonian, right? How would the theocrats respond to that Thomas Jefferson, who essentially cut the supernatural Jesus out of the Bible because he said, oh, Christ had some good teachings, but there's no real good reason to support any of this magical stuff, right? You don't hear about that Jefferson from the Christian nationalists and the evangelicals and the pulpit preachers and the theocrats. Thomas Jefferson wrote a famous letter to John Adams. He said, "When once we quit the basis of sensation, all is in the wind. To talk of immaterial existences is to talk of nothings. To say that the human soul, angels, God are immaterial is to say they're nothings. Or that there is no God, no angels, no soul. I cannot reason otherwise. But I believe I'm supported in my creed of materialism by Locke, Tracy, and Stewart." Of course, Thomas Jefferson would not have mandated a specific religion, his personal religion, whatever that was. And we are convinced he was a deistic and perhaps held to a deistic God. And he was right in line with his presidential predecessor, John Adams, who had signed his name to the Treaty of Tripoli. We hear the Treaty of Tripoli talked about quite a bit. Here's the context behind that. We used to run shipping lanes around Tripoli, which is now modern-day Libya. And we once, before we broke with Britain, enjoyed the protection of Britain against piracy. But once we broke with Britain and began the American experiments after the Revolutionary War, we didn't have those protections against piracy, and so we needed protections guaranteed for our ships in the region, and we formulated the Treaty of Tripoli. But Tripoli was nervous. A Muslim-majority population worried that we were going to come in and colonize, try to take over, Americanize, take away their Muslim faith, whatever. And they wanted assurances, and that's exactly what the United States did. We put together the Treaty of Tripoli with this famous quotation. It says, "As the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims. And as the said states never entered into any war or act of hostility against any Muslim nation, it's declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries." There it is in black and white, right? John Adams is saying, we're not a Christian nation. And don't worry about us. We're not coming to Christianize Tripoli. Thomas Jefferson's successor, James Madison, was a huge critic of organized religion. He opposed a bill that had come out in 1785. They wanted to use taxpayer money to teach Christianity in public schools. It was James Madison who publicly opposed that. He opposed this dangerous abuse of power because religion can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. You can't mandate a religion. This is a private and personal affair. It doesn't belong in the public schools. Thomas Paine, much like Thomas Jefferson, he often referenced God in the most deistic sense. He wrote a series of pamphlets called The Age of Reason, came out in the late 1700s and in the early 1800s. And he strongly attacked the institution of the Christian church and organized religion. He famously called Christianity a fable. This is Thomas Paine. He wrote in The Age of Reason, the study of theology as it stands in Christian churches is the study of nothing. It is founded on nothing. It rests on no principles, it proceeds by no authorities, it has no data, it can demonstrate nothing, and it admits of no conclusion. Benjamin Franklin, he may have believed in a deistic God, but he was a longtime critic of organized religion. He was often writing these parodies of Puritan intolerance among the colonies, and instead he wanted to promote human goodness. Right? Human goodness. He famously said, vital religion has always suffered when orthodoxy is more regarded than virtue. Right? This is humanism. Right? Your virtue, your morality, your attitudes, actions, and deeds toward your fellow men and women, these are the most important things, not the orthodoxy, not the dogma. That's humanism. So flash forward. 2018, in the month of June, Pastor Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Church, Dallas, Texas, mega pastor here in the United States, does a famous sermon broadcast worldwide called America is a Christian Nation. And Pastor Jeffress said this:
America was not founded as a nation that is neutral toward Christianity. America was founded as a Christian nation.
Now, he's really slippery here because he was saying that Thomas Jefferson didn't promote or endorse a governmental religion, but he did endorse a governmental faith. Guess which faith Pastor Jeffress is talking about? All right, Christianity, of course. Christian privilege, Christian nationalism. Interesting that Pastor Jeffress is part of Donald Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board. Why does a secular, state church separated government have an evangelical advisory board? Well, this is a really good question. Of course, we see the evangelicals all over the current administration. Paula White, con artist, scam artist, evangelist Paula White. She's at the inauguration praying for Donald Trump, endorsing him, giving God's endorsement. You've got Franklin Graham at the inauguration. In his prayer, he said this:
Mr. President, in the Bible, rain is a sign of God's blessing. And it started to rain, Mr. President, when you came to the platform.
Now, what's most likely? In the month of January in Washington, where it rains 9 days on the average out of every 30, is it most likely that God rained down divine baptism on Donald Trump, or that it occasionally rains in Washington, D.C., right? But this is what we're facing. You've got Energy Secretary Rick Perry, who is calling Donald Trump the chosen one. You've got John Hagee, mega pastor from Texas, of course. He's talking about a Christian nation and how Trump has been brought to us. By the way, Hagee is a Zionist. He's a Christian Zionist, which is part of an end times narrative where the United States endorses Israel and the sanctity, the sovereign nation of Israel, is part of the book of Revelation, which precedes the end times. This is all bringing Jesus' return. And this is a terrifying notion that's echoed even within the Trump administration's cabinet members and staff. You've got Mike Pompeo, U.S. Secretary of State, saying that Donald Trump may have been brought up to power by God, like the Queen Esther of the Bible, to protect and endorse the Jews as part of the biblical narrative. You've got Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, saying that the public school system is actually there to advance God's kingdom. her specific God. We're not talking about Allah or Krishna, right? We're talking about her specific pet deity with a proper name. You've got Project Blitz, this massive effort to change the laws to favor a Christian nation and Christian nationalists, with hundreds of bills, exemptions from civil rights laws, assaults on women's reproductive health. They're trying to mandate the Bible and Christian prayers in public schools, that kind of thing. You've got Attorney General William Barr. He recently gave a speech at the National Association of Religious Broadcasters, and he was talking about this attack, this assault by the secularists on religious liberty or religious freedom. This is not being used in the way that the Danbury Baptist used it. That phrase, religious liberty, is kind of a conversation stopper these days. If you say, well, you're attacking my liberty, you're attacking my constitutional right to believe, which is not the case at all, right? We're not saying William Barr can't have and hold a personal religious faith. We're saying you can't make it rule of law and mandate that faith to everybody else. And yet that is what's happening right now in the Trump administration. That is why the 2020 elections are so critical. It's not about whether you love the Democratic candidate. It's whether or not one party over another favors Christian nationalism, which is anti-constitution and not representative of an America where we're seeing the rise of the nones, the non-religious. We are seeing an exponential growth of people who are not necessarily atheist, but they certainly aren't religious, and especially aren't Christian. They deserve a government that represents them, that protects the state church line, that allows people to have and hold any religious faith or none, but does not mandate it as part of a national narrative. We need a government that does not have an evangelical advisory board pitching a specific religion. We need a constitutional government that respects the writings of our founding fathers and the ideas on which this country was based, right? They fought and bled and died for that specific wall to be built and enforced. And it's time for us to stand up, to be activist, and to vote however we can, to demonstrate however we can, to resist the Christian nationalist tide in the United States. They do not get a seat at the head of the table. They must share the table with the rest of us. My friend and constitutional attorney Andrew Seidel at the Freedom from Religion Foundation wrote this tweet back in December. He said, "Dear white evangelicals, we're not coming for your rights. We're coming for your privilege. You'll be able to worship as you see fit, so long as you don't use government power to promote your religion or use your religion to violate another's rights." That pretty much sums it up, right? We're not coming for your rights, but we are coming for your privilege. And this notion that America belongs to Christianity is not just immoral, it's not just factually wrong, it's not just unconstitutional. It is, in fact, un-American. Thanks so much for watching.